Welcome to the Thinking Big podcast. I'm your host, Sean Osborn, and today we are embarking on a journey that's nothing short of extraordinary. On January 15th, 2009, 15 years ago today, Dave Sanderson was one of the last passengers off the plane that crashed into the Hudson River, best known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Can you imagine? You're on a routine flight and suddenly it turns into a fight for survival. This was Dave's reality. But what's incredible about his story isn't just survival, it's what came after. About how a moment of crisis can become a turning point in our lives, shaping our path in ways we never expected. Today, Dave joins us to share his powerful narrative. From the terrifying moments of the crash to the calm, his story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. But it doesn't stop there. Dave's journey of transformation, of turning adversity into opportunity and fear into courage, is something that speaks to each one of us. So buckle up as we explore not just the events that made headlines around the world, but also the profound personal and professional evolution that followed. Whether you're facing your own turbulence or seeking inspiration to navigate life's unpredictable skies, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. So Thinking Big Tribe, thank you so much for listening to us today. And I want to welcome a very, very special guest today, and that's Dave Sanderson. Thank you for being on the show today.
Sean, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be with you today.
So we met, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago at an event that you did with, I think it was Leah Woodford's, one of her events.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about what happened, because that'll set things up a little bit.
There you go, Sean. Thank you very much, and thank you. I appreciate that. So here's a short version. I was on the plane crash known as the Miracle on the Hudson. I was not supposed to be on the plane that day. I was scheduled to be on a later flight. We got done early with business. So I got on that earlier flight, which just turned out to be U.S. Airways 1549, which is now known as the Miracle on the Hudson. So I was the last passenger off the plane, not by design, but it was just turned out to be that way. And I was, and people ask me, we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but about what really goes on inside when the plane is actually going down. And so, yeah, it was one of those things where you have to really manage your mindset. And you really have to lead yourself first before you can lead other people. But fortunately for me, that we had a crew that got everybody down, thank goodness. And then we had another issue. We had to get out of a sinking plane in 36-degree water. So I was involved with that, and it's coming up on the 15th anniversary here in a couple of weeks.
Man, can you believe that's been 15 years already?
Yeah, I tell you what, it's we talk about this year flying by, Sean. This 15 years has flown by.
Wow. And talk about something that has truly changed your life. I mean, a split second changed every trajectory, that I can tell from your life on what you do, how you think, how you act. And so you actually got into, one of the things that came from that, and we'll talk about that, is your public speaking. You're starting to be an advocate for that and for many different things. But so that's two of my biggest fears, yeah. Flying.
Okay.
So, and just like many people listening, it's like, what happened to you is like the worst thing that's our biggest fear. Every time we go up on a plane is, okay, is this sucker going to stay flying? So you conquered that fear pretty damn well. And then the other is you got into public speaking, which is, I think for some people, public speaking is probably scarier than flying.
The number one fear, that's exactly right. The number one fear, as I've read over the last several years, is people getting in front of an audience or a crowd of people and to have to publicly speak and state their story or state their opinion. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, Sean, because the most often asked question I still get after almost 15 years is, how did you get back on a plane after you went through a plane crash? And, what I really realized, what people are really asking me is, how did you bounce back and have the resiliency to bounce back after all that uncertainty? Because that's one thing you realize when you're going down in a plane is total uncertainty. You have no control, total uncertainty. You don't know how anything's going to play out. So you really have to manage your mindset. So it's it's a question I get almost every day from somebody that I run into and or picks up sends me an email and says, how did you do it? So I'm very honored to be able to share that. And then it turned into, like you and I spoke about, is I had the opportunity to go out and speak about it, which was not my game plan. Never was my game plan, but there's a situation that happened to me that all of a sudden I did it, and I wasn't very good. It was actually the first time I spoke in public about this, but something happened that really set me on the trajectory to do what I'm doing right now.
when that happens to you, in other words, when the plane's going down, did you, I know everything probably was in slow motion, but did the core of people come out during that time? In other words, did it bring out the core of who someone was when something like that happens?
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction, Sean, because I think what happens when you get in a situation like this, maybe even a car wreck, whatever the traumatic experience may be, you see the true essence and the identity of the person really come to fruition. And well, we were very blessed, and I was very blessed to be around people whose values and character really stepped up at that moment in time. And of course, we've seen that through the crew and the captain and the first officer. We've seen that. But the passengers, likewise, I think one of the reasons that happened, and just as a personal opinion, nobody else has influenced this opinion, but it really came out when I had the opportunity. I flew to Orlando, and one of the benefits that I do get is I get to speak to the captain and first officer quite often. That's one of the things that I get to do. And one of the captains sort of gave me, when we were in Orlando, gave me a perspective. And what he told me is this: he goes, "You look around the people that get on this plane in Orlando." He said, "What kind of people do you have get on this plane?" I'm looking around like, well, who do you have, right? You have tourists primarily going to the parks, right? Holiday, and a few business people like me. Then he said, look at what kind of people were on your plane. And it's a 180-degree difference. Coming out of New York, 90% business people. And business people usually go into a game plan mode, right? When something happens, there's got to have a strategy behind it. So I think that had a lot to do with that day's outcome. Is yes, the crew got everybody down that day and we'll be forever grateful. But the passengers, the majority of the passengers were business people who were going through their mind, okay, what do I do if all stuff breaks loose? And what am I going to do the next step? And I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure that did, because Orlando, you look at, there's probably a lot of kids on there. There's a lot of families, a lot of people who don't maybe necessarily fly a lot, right, or have that mindset. And so my first question would have been, you have people that ask you questions, how'd you get back on a plane? My first question was, did you at least get a voucher for the plane ride home?
Listen, from that point forward, I didn't pay for anything for U.S. Airways for a good 45 days. All right, they definitely took care of me. They did a tremendous job of taking care of me, and I'm sure of everybody else. But no, most definitely. Listen, I was treated like I'm going to say this, like a rock star, right? I mean, because they were taking care of all of us at that point in time.
And then my second question was, did you get your luggage back?
That's another question. So, all my luggage was lost. All I came out with, in fact, when I got to the hospital, I didn't even have any clothes. All right. I had my underwear and my watch. That's all I had left. I got some of it back. When they cleaned it up, the river afterwards, and picked all the luggage out of the river, they tried to clean it as well as they possibly could. But, it's been in the river. It's nasty. You can only do so much, right? You can only do so much. I got some of it back. I would say about maybe 30% I got back, but it was pretty much unsalvageable.
I like the way that you take this, what happened to you and bring it forward, because I think your message is so important, because we all have these things happening in our life. We all have crap that just happens that we don't plan for. And how as humans can we deal with this crap to actually come out the other side better? Look at it as the way I look at it is the universe is always trying to tell me something. Sometimes it's with a feather. Sometimes it's with a 2x4, and that plane is obviously a 2x4 to say, okay, Dave, you need to go in a different direction. You need to do something different. How can we take these events and look at them from a perspective of this is a tool, or this is a teaching for us to look at what we're doing?
Thanks for that question. I want to answer with two different perspectives. Number one of the things I talk about and I shared in my TED Talk is about the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion of your life, and emotion is your life. So whatever meaning you attach to that situation, and I'll give you an example. I was in the green room maybe 3 or 4 weeks after the miracle on the Hudson with some other passengers in the crew. We were in Good Morning America. We were in the green room, and one of the passengers got pretty vocal. And the first thing I thought was, like, what's wrong with this guy, right? I mean, what's wrong with it? I mean, we survived a plane crash. We're on national TV. I mean, things could be a lot worse. But then I found out later that he was going through a divorce and he just lost his job. So the meaning he attached to the plane incident was a devastation. The meaning I attached, it was a blessing. It was a blessing for me. You learn lessons out of situations if you're aware and you look back. And, one of the things I learned over the last several years is most of the time in my life previous to this, it's called the gap in the gain. I would look in the gap side, which means I'm never good enough. I mean, something's going to happen. And I was always putting myself maybe in a negative mindset. What I learned is if you switch it around and say, you know what? Look how much progress we've made. Look how what I survived. Look what's been happening. What more can I do? All of a sudden, it sets you off on a different pathway. So I think number one, you do that. But second, this is what my third book's about, Sean. This is exactly what this third book's about, because my third book's coming out in January. It's called The Limitless Life. The first book was about the day that happened and the skills that I had to use to survive. The second book was about all the moments in my life that led up to that helped me have the resiliency to be able to do what I did. This book's about exactly this question. What lessons can you use out of a situation to turn it around and not only impact you yourself, but more importantly, impact somebody else's life and use it on a positive perspective instead of regressing and sort of getting stacked down, because that's what happened during COVID. You look back at COVID, what happened during COVID? Well, people all of a sudden you had COVID, which means you couldn't go out of your house, you were locked down. Oh, by the way, Sean, we had police issues. Oh, by the way, we had social justice issues. Oh, by the way, we had an election that was going on and stacked on people, so people didn't know how the pathway to get out. So the meaning they were attaching is, man, I'm never going to get out of this thing. Instead of the people who really succeeded said, okay, I've got to be resourceful, right? I have to start looking at there's three things people are looking at who are successful. Number one, do they have confidence to be able to get it done? That means leading yourself first. Second, do they have competence? Do they have some talent to be able to pull it off? But third is what set everybody, the people who really set off on a different pathway on a different level. Number three is being creative. Those people we're looking for people who have creative solutions to how they go forward out of this thing. So when I coach and teach people, I'm like, we work on confidence, competence, and creativity, because that's what people are looking for these days.
Man, there is so much gold in what you just said. And, so the three books, it's almost like a trilogy, because they actually go together. I mean,
exactly
it's the day of,
exactly what we did.
How you got there. Yeah. So that's, I can't wait to get to see that third book. And you said some, one of the things you said in there was being creative about what we do. And it's like, to me, it's never about the resources we have. It's about how resourceful we can be to get out of what we have. And it's like, you talk about, everyone's got their own kind of plane crash that they're going through. For me, I was at 15, I was on my own, homeless, kicked out of school, a drug addict that was, really the poster child for don't do drugs. And that was honestly the best gift I could ever have in life, because that adversity is what built who I am today. And without that adversity, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be doing what I do. And it's like, so how can we take those, that could have either killed me or could have made me stronger. And the same with you. I mean, it's like and how we do those. So I know you talk about this in your talks and stuff on, your ultimate challenges and what can we do when we're faced with these things.
Yeah. I actually wrote a blog about this subject a couple of weeks ago, and the blog was titled "The Moment That Mattered the Most." Because, people think, well, maybe the plane crash was the moment that mattered the most. It really wasn't. It was a moment back in 1995 when I was the top sales guy at one of the largest technology companies in the country, and a new manager came in. And he came in, I had a successful year, and his first act, Sean, he had to give me a check for $64,000, commission check. Now, in 1995, $64,000 was a lot of money. I mean, I was like, you're a ton in it, right? But Sean, when he gave me a check, he looked at me and said, you'll never make this amount of money again while I'm here. Never. And he and I almost came to blows, just candidly, a little bit later. But I left where I was very successful. I said, initially I looked at it as a failure. I lost. Then I said, you know what? That was actually the moment that gave me the resiliency. You know what? No one tells me I can't do something, right? No, and I pushed back. And I tell people that was the moment, because what you just said is exactly right. The reason when you were down at 15 or 16 years old and you were doing all this, That had to happen. That had to happen for you to be able to be who you are today. Because it's not failure as long as you look at it from a learning perspective. You learned so many lessons during that time period that now help you build resilience, help you to be able to touch people the way you're touching them right now. Because one thing that I learned, and giving a reference to Marvel movies, I don't know if you like Marvel movies. I love Marvel movies.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the movies that I love the most is Doctor Strange, because there's a scene in Doctor Strange where the Ancient One is ready to go off on her. She's ready to go, right? She's dying. And she looks at Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange, don't go, don't go. And she says, Stephen, you still don't get it, man. You still don't get it. This isn't about you. And I think the one thing, once you start realizing that in life, is this is not about you, it opens up so many avenues for you in your life. Because all of a sudden now you're thinking this way instead of this way.
And so one of the things that, when you were talking, when I saw you a couple of years ago, one of the things that you had talked about, or one of the things that you had talked through was, when the plane was actually down and, you were in the water, there were people who would scramble to get off. And that's human nature. It's like, it's do or die. It's, fight or flight,
Yep.
right? And I'm getting the hell off the plane. But that's not what you did. And that, to me, that's what stood out in your story was you weren't the first off the plane. You didn't do that. Explain what happened, because to me that is such a powerful thing.
My game plan, because I played sports, right? And when you're in a game, you had a game plan. So my game plan, as this thing was going down, I said, if I survive, I got to have a game plan. And my game plan was aisle up, out. Aisle up, out. And I just kept saying that in my head, because if I say it in my head enough, it becomes automatic, right? So when I got to the aisle, it was my time to go. My game plan was to go out until I heard my mom. And my mom passed away in 1997. But when I was a child, and she probably told my sister and brother the same thing, but she said something to me that resonated at that moment: if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And at that point, I had to make a choice. I think that was one of the greatest gifts my mother and father gave me. Is they had, when I was young. I'm guilty of not doing this. So I'm not saying my mother was smarter than I am. She made her kids make decisions and have consequences for decisions. She didn't say, do this. She said, if you do this. So I had to make a choice. And instead of getting out, I climbed over the seats to go towards the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. And people were moving pretty quick, right? Like you just mentioned, right? Things are moving fast. No one's out of sorts, though. No one's losing it and pushing people out of the way. They were focused but moving. And so when it was my time, I got to the right door on 10F, and I saw a light. I'm like, okay, it's my time to get out of here. And there was no room on the wing of the boat for me. So that's why I was inside the plane, waist deep in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes, holding on to a lifeboat so it didn't float out in the river until I had to go. I just had to go. And
that to me takes a level of, I don't know if it's courage. So some would say courage, stupidity, and craziness.
Well, my wife said I was stupid, right? So you're exactly right. You're mimicking my wife, Sean. She said, why'd you do that, right? So
that's what my wife would say. Are you an idiot?
Yep.
And it's, but it's those things. It's those decisions that we make that really, I don't know if we make those decisions because of who we are, or that helps make who we are because of the decisions we make. I think it's both ways.
Yeah.
I think it goes both.
You said something a moment ago, and one of the things I teach and talk about is there's really two critical skills that a leader has to have. First is the one we talked about a little earlier: resourcefulness. That's it. You got to be resourceful. But the second thing is you got to be able to make a decision and go. And most people will not make decisions. I'm like in sales, right? No, they'd rather put off the decision to make a decision because they may be wrong. A leader will make a decision and live with the consequences, one way or the other, right? So I learned that years ago from my mentor, Bill, and then being around my next mentor, Tony Robbins, when I was with him, as a security director for 10 years. He would always make a decision. He'd always implore me to make a decision, right? Make the call. And candidly, Sean, sometimes I made the wrong call. But what do you do when you make the wrong call? You learn from it.
Yep.
That's why. So I think when I had to make that decision, the decision was like, okay, I can either go or help. Right now, I'm alive. I know I'm alive. I didn't know anybody else back there was alive, right? I didn't. So I said, okay, I'll go back and check it out, right? Just check it out. That's how that played out.
Some of what I do is open water swimming.
Yeah, me too.
And I can't even imagine getting in that cold of water. That's not like, the whole new craze is getting in this cold plunge.
Yeah.
What do you think about you probably cringe whenever you see those commercials for like a cold plunge, like, man.
Well, I do cryotherapy now. So I put my body in negative 235 for 3 minutes, but I do open water swimming too with the Navy SEALs and special ops, right? I know exactly what you're talking about. You dive in that water. I mean, I just swam with special ops out in San Diego and Coronado Bay. It's 65-degree water, which sounds warm. No, this was 36-degree water. So
I can't even imagine.
And that's why the EMTs always said, I don't know how you survived except for adrenaline. And I think that's exactly what it was, just adrenaline, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go back to this part of your story is I don't think people realize how cold 36-degree water is. And you, by helping others, you 100% put your life on the line because of that. And it's not because the plane crashed. It's that water will kill you very quickly at that temperature. You will go into hypothermia. So putting yourself in that situation, especially when you were already in it, it's one thing to say, yeah, I will help people out. It's another thing to say, yeah, I'm going to stay and help people out when you're halfway in, 36-degree water and it's literally killing you, and to continue to do that. How did you finally get to the boat? Because I cannot imagine, even when you're that cold, even you can't move your body.
Well, what happened was, about 5 to 6 minutes into this, on hanging out the door, I felt the plane shift. And I didn't know what happened until later. I found out later because I talked to some of the people, the first responders that sort of told me the story, that one of the tugboats that was part of the rescue, as he was backing out, he hit the front of the plane. And I felt water go up my back. That was the first time, Sean, I felt the water, because I was like, go, 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 right? But when I felt that thing go up my back, I'm like, I'm got to get out here because this thing's going down, right? And that's why I jumped in and swam to the closest boat that I could find. And it was about 15 yards. I said, tell people it's the longest 15-yard swim because that wing is about 15 yards long. And that's how I swam right next to the wing, because in case something happened, I could at least try to grab something, right? So I swam next to the wing, and I got there, and now I'm bobbing in the water, right? I'm bobbing in the water, and I could climb. And I yelled up, can't, and then I heard my mom again, because the word she hated most of life was can't. So she would never let her kids say can't in the house. That word was verboten. Would never say. But then fortunately, that's when people show up, right? When other people show up when you need help. Because I've been I've been in head deep water for now a couple minutes, right? And these two guys basically grabbed my arms and pulled me on the ferry, and that's how I got off the plane, and at least the part safety.
Man, when I talk with people, I try putting myself in their situation to, feel the empathy, or feel what was going through, you at the time. It's like, this is one of those times that I literally cannot even put myself in that situation, because it is such a, I don't know what I would do. I hope I would do the right thing, but until it happens, it's like, man, my instincts could take over, and I could be one that said, you know what, I'm out. See you.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you said it, because, I've had some people. In fact, I spoke with one of the passengers. We did a 2-person talk, and he was one of the first passengers out, right? But I didn't judge him, because he had to do what he had to do, right? And I think that's what happens in a situation. You got to do what you got to do, right? And some people, the mind. Okay, I was told I got to get out of the plane this way. I'm getting out of the plane this way, right?
Yeah,
and that's fine. I don't think I would have been judged any differently if I just got out of the plane. But, I just had a different perspective. I mean, I grew up, in a small town where everybody took care of everybody. I mean, nowadays I live in a bigger city, and that's not the way it is now these days. No. Not the way it is. Unfortunately, it's very unfortunate. But, your neighbors would look after you. I mean, you could go out when I was a kid, you go out until dinner time, and parents never know who you are, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And, you need to think about it. Now I won't let my kids down the street.
Nope. That's a whole nother episode, man. But that is a sad thing that we have, I think, right now from our culture standpoint of, it's like, I wouldn't let I've got a granddaughter that's 12, and I would not let her. I won't even let her go play in the front yard. Yeah. I mean, you don't know now.
That's right.
I mean, it's just we're living in that type of society, and that's a bad thing. And who knows what will happen if something like this happens in 10 years with the society that we're in. what will happen with the people. Hopefully there would be people that would, stand up and do the right thing. But God, you never know. You never know.
No, but I think on that plane, everybody was helping everybody that day. I think everybody was. And I tell, and one of the first blogs I ever wrote, Sean, was you got to be your own first responder, right? It's like I tell you on the plane, right? Put your mask on first before you put it on somebody else. Okay, yeah. Get yourself together so you can help somebody else. I think that's exactly, people were helping everybody that day. I think all leaders stepped up that day on that plane.
And that's a good thing, because my first thought would be that it would have been complete chaos, and it would have been complete, like, people punching, scratching, trying to get to the door, and to see that that's not really what happened, that people actually cared for one another. And, whether you're first off or last off, you did what you needed to do for everyone to make it out. So that is fantastic. So what's one thing that, we can do right now to start to, face with, our ultimate challenges? What's something that we can do?
Yeah, one of the things that when I coach people, one of the things we work hard on is you got to work on yourself first, right? In which, one of the things that I was very blessed to do back in the late 80s with my mentor, he implored me. In fact, I mean, he was very adamant that you've got to invest in yourself every year. So he started me doing a personal development, budget every year. And every year I put together a budget where I'm going to spend time on myself, because you got to work on your own mindset first. But the second thing you got to do is you got to put yourself in the appropriate state of mind, or state management, what I call it, right? And and you can do that very easily. You can change the way you perceive things very quickly just by the way you either move your body, what you focus on, or how you talk to yourself. So these are just things that you can do yourself, so you can make sure that you're in the proper state to be able to help somebody else. So you can help them be able to be a better person and get their outcomes likewise. So I would say those two things right there that I would probably start with.
Yeah, and that's why I teach, mindset development and personal development, is because that is and it's the last thing that people think that they need, yep. But it's the first thing that they actually need.
Well, Sean, I mean,
and it's like,
if you look at my, I was very blessed on my book From Turmoil to Triumph, my second book. I was very blessed that Tony Robbins was very kind to give me a testimonial for the book, and on the cover of the book, it's his basic essence is a mentor is essential to be who you are, because he talks in his testimonial in my book that if it wasn't for Jim Rohn, he wasn't Tony Robbins. But the reason he did that was, and Jim Rohn told him and taught him, is because he wanted Tony to help other people. And that's why he does what he does, and that's what I do what I do, and that's what you do what you do. Is because if you don't invest in yourself and have somebody else give you perspectives, you're not able to impact somebody else's life. Because the last thing, last thing I say when I speak is I implore people, be a mentor and get a mentor. Just those two things, and watch how your life will take a different direction.
Yeah, that simple statement has huge meaning, and it's absolutely true. If you don't have a mentor and you're not mentoring others, you're not growing. It's and to me, it's that old saying, you're either at the dinner table or you're on the menu. Yep. You're either growing or you're dying.
Right.
There's no other way. So again, thank you so much for being on the show, Dave. It's so nice to be able to sit down with you one-on-one and talk. And for those listening right now, you can reach Dave at davesandersonspeaks.com. That's your website. You got tons of stuff up there. I will also put that obviously in the show notes for people to go to. You've got a ton of good stuff up there. One, you've obviously your speaking stuff and all of your stuff that you do for speaking, but you've got your books up there. You've got courses up there. You've got some great resources for people to go up there and take a look at.
Well, thank you. One of the things over next year, what we're really focused on is I've been getting people coming for so long is, why don't you do workshops? Why don't you teach people this in a different way? So, I'll just leave you with one last story. Is in 1983, when I graduated from college, my dad gave me 30 days to be out of the house. All right. And I tell people one of the greatest lessons my dad taught me, Sean, was he's a man of his word. Because in 30 days, I wasn't out, and he got me my first job, which was a second assistant restaurant manager at a place called Howard Johnson. And which means, you're the low man on the totem pole. Third stop was here in Charlotte. So you're not working first shift, man. You're working graveyard, second shift in graveyard. But that turned out to be a blessing for me, because what happened, this is why I want to share this story, because this is the importance of it and why I implore people will be doing what I'm doing is a gentleman by the name of Bill, and he was 77 years old, and his wife's name was Bonnie, and they would come in every night for ice cream and coffee. We talk and talk. And there came a time when I started dating my future fiance, and I didn't have any money. So he gave me he said, here, take your girl out on me, right? He gave me a couple movie passes, and I took my wife out to Queens Park down here in Charlotte, right? My future wife, Queens Park, gave the tickets to this young man, Sean. He said, tell Mr. Bill, hey. All right. So go to the movies. The next day I see Bill. He goes, tell me about your experience. He goes, so some guy told me to tell you, hey, he goes, yeah, because I own that movie theater. In fact, I owned over 80 movie theaters and restaurants through the Carolinas over the last so many years. It's like, whoa. So this guy is a guy who's been there, done that, right? Fast forward to December 24th, 1984. He comes to the restaurant early, and he said, I want to show you what I got Bonnie for Christmas. And it was a brand new blue Corvette. Now, Sean, I'd never seen a Corvette. I couldn't spell Corvette. I never smelled a Corvette, but it's the coolest thing I ever saw, man, right? And he said, so let's take a ride. He threw me the keys. We went up and down Woodlawn Road here in Charlotte. Came back. I gave the keys back. I said, Bonnie's going to dig this, man. He goes, you need one of these. I said, Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I can barely afford to pay my rent. He goes, that's your problem. He said, your mind. So let me show you how to be successful. And for 13 years, Sean, he gave me these lessons on how to be successful, which I shared one of them, right? Invest in yourself first, right? Fast forward to May of 1997. He invited me to his office. He said, I want to share a couple of things. First thing, I've got lung cancer. Now, Bill smoked unfiltered Camels since the 20s. So, it's sad, but, it is what it is. But then he went over to his desk, Sean, and pulled out some papers. He sat right next to me right here and put them on my lap. And I said, what is this? He goes, these were the handwritten notes I wrote down in 1929 on how I was going to be successful. I want to give this to you. But you got to promise me one thing. I said, what? He goes, do not let it die with you. And he passed away September of that year. So what we were just talking about a moment ago, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I'm going to be doing workshops and educating people. Because for many years, Sean, I didn't fulfill that promise. And like I just told you a few minutes ago, my dad told me, my word is my bond, right? And I failed that. I'm not going to fail it again. So if anybody would like to, learn some of these ideas, thoughts, that I've been able to use and help other people, go to my website, and we're going to be doing some public workshops here coming up in the next couple of months to sort of start sharing this in a more public way.
That is fantastic, Dave. I will definitely go check that out myself. And I you said some big things in there before we sign off. Is one, you took the time to sit down with someone to get to know them, and to me, that's one of the biggest things. People who are, we'll just say successful, but let's say people who are on their game, whatever success means to you, they are more than willing to normally help us if we take the time to ask and get to know them.
Yeah. Just ask.
And had you not taken the time to sit down with him, you would never have what you have.
Never would have known who he was, right? Yeah. And man, he was I call him the Sam Walton of Charlotte because he wore a flannel shirt and drove a pickup truck. And so wouldn't even think of this, right? And all of a sudden you figure this guy has been doing this for 60 years, right? Yeah. Obviously he's figured something out that I have figured out. Yeah. So, yeah. Well,
again, thank you so much for coming on, Dave. I can't wait to go look at those because I think, to me, that is, as we get older, to me, as humans, we are trying to replicate. Yep. I mean, that's as humans, we're trying, and when we're younger, it's with children. Yep. But I think as we get older, it's with our knowledge and having that live on. That be the legacy.
That's right.
So again, thank you so much for being on the show. And I can't wait for this episode to come out because this is such a big story and such a great story. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean, for having me.